Hello, and welcome to What is Innovation? The podcast that explores the reality of a word that is in danger of losing its meaning altogether. This podcast is produced by Outlast Consulting, LLC, a boutique consultancy that helps companies use innovation principles to solve their toughest business problems. I'm your host, Jared Simmons, and I'm so excited to have Dr. Britt Andreatta. Dr. Britt Andreatta is an internationally recognized thought leader who uses her background in leadership, neuroscience, psychology, and education to create brain science-based solutions for today's workplace challenges. Britt is the former CLO for lynda.com, now LinkedIn Learning, and has over 10 million views worldwide of her online courses. She regularly consults with organizations on leadership development and learning strategy. Britt is the author of several books on the brain science of success, including Wired to Grow, Wired to Resist, and Wired to Connect. In 2021, she was named a top 20 learning influencer and a top 20 HR influencer for leadership development. And in 2022, a top 10 learning influencer. Dr. Andreatta, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. I am so excited for this conversation.
Me too. Please call me Britt. And I love talking with folks around all these kinds of ideas.
Fantastic. All right, Britt. Well, then let's dive right in. What, in your mind, is innovation?
Love this question. And I've actually spent some time researching it. So what I have found is that, and I will put it against creativity because I think the two get confused a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Innovation is the work that's required to make an idea viable. So while creativity is the brainstorming that happens to come up with a new idea, innovation is how you take that idea and kind of capitalize on it, turn that idea into something that can go to market. And it's a process like design thinking. It's a process that you engage in to do that. Creativity is something also very important. Creativity comes first. It's that brainstorming, that aha moment, that flash of insight, that newness of literally conceiving of something new and creative and different.
Mm-hmm.
So creativity, coming up with an idea, innovation, capitalizing on an idea. Another way to think about it is creativity is spending money to generate ideas, and innovation is spending ideas to generate money.
Oh, I like that. That is great. Yes, that is so helpful. We talk about creativity and innovation a lot in the terms almost become interchangeable, to your point.
Yeah.
In the day-to-day conversation, relating those two things in that sort of way almost makes them by definition independent.
Yeah.
I really like that.
They're interdependent.
Yes.
But they're completely separate processes. I consult with a lot of organizations, and I'll go in and see organizations that are great on creativity and fall down on innovation. Or awesome with innovation, but not so great with creativity. And to really shine in the marketplace, you have to be able to support both. They're slightly different things.
Interesting. So much to unpack here. I want to go back to the first thing you said about innovation. The first word you used was work.
Yeah.
That work can take a lot of different forms. Talk to me a bit more about when you say work, what that looks like.
Yeah, essentially organizations, and there's some research that's been done on this. There's kind of two paths that organizations do. One is the breakthrough path. So this is where you're think tank, you're breaking a lot of glass, you're investing in that big disruptive idea that's going to be new and really change things. And then there's the incremental path, which is where you take something that's good and you innovate to make it 10% better, or you're bringing about change, but in small steps. It's an incremental improvement, whether it's in your process or your product or something. You're taking something that already exists and tweaking it to just up-level it in some way. And what's really interesting is organizations, when you talk to CEOs, they'll spend a lot of time talking about the breakthrough, but when you actually analyze where they're spending their people and financial resources, it's 90% on incremental.
Wow.
So part of the conversation I have with executives is, hey, these are different things, right? Both paths are valuable. They're both going to pay off in some form, but you talk a lot about one, but where you're really putting your money is on the other one. So do you want to balance that out? Do you want to do something different?
Right. What kind of challenges does that imbalance create? I've worked in companies where the CEO standing up on the stage talking about this next big, bright, shiny thing 5 years from now, and you're working 12 hours a day doing the incremental work. Does that have an impact on culture or morale at all?
Absolutely. I mean, I think most employees, whatever type of organization they work at, our sense of where we're headed, the sense of purpose you have for both the organization and your work within it comes from the signals you get from the leaders and the executives. And then some leaders are great at being super inspirational and getting everyone super excited. But ultimately, if that doesn't get backed up with action,
right,
humans are pretty good BS detectors. And so where people can start to disengage or feel less excited about working somewhere is when they start to notice a pattern. Maybe the first 3 all hands meetings, you're all there, but you start to notice, oh yeah, the follow through won't be there. Or they say this, but the minute someone has a good idea, they're actually sidelined or they're demoted, or we pay attention to how people are actually treated or if resources are ever brought forth. So it's walking your talk. It's not just having great talk.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You know, in my head, I'm imagining the 90-10 flip where 90% of the conversation is about breakthrough, but 90% of the effort, like you're saying, is on the incremental side. And that tension, you hire a lot of smart people and they're not oblivious to that disconnect.
Yeah. Well, and the other place it can be off balance the other way too, which is all the money is being put into the think tank kind of breakthrough efforts. And yet there's so much revenue that could be generated from the incremental path too. So it really shouldn't be a one or the other. It's a balance, but then it's calling out the, hey, you talk a lot about this one, but 90% of your resources are in the other. So do you want to do something about that?
Yeah, it's fun holding that mirror up, right?
Yeah, sometimes that goes well, sometimes not so much, but
I can imagine.
Generally people pay me to come in and hold up the mirror. So it's okay.
Yeah, there you go. That's such a great framework. And the other aspect is, I think a lot of times only one of those things gets labeled as innovation.
Right.
In your definition, you're saying innovation work takes 2 different forms. So the work of incremental innovation is still innovation.
Absolutely. And it can yield a lot of shift and change in revenue in an organization. It can really pay off for itself. The other thing that's really interesting about organizations in terms of what they're willing to invest or how they prefer to make innovation happen, according to this one survey, 51% prefer to build their own innovation. So they want to do it in-house. 31% want to partner with an external source of some kind, and 18% are willing to pay for innovation support.
Right.
But what's really interesting is that when they go for the build it themselves, the average time from ideation to launch, 25%, it's around 2 years, 2 or more years.
Yeah.
35% are between 1 and 2 years. And then 31% is between 7 and 12 months. So even when organizations say, yeah, we really want to innovate, they can take a long time to get an idea going because they're so committed to building it in-house and not necessarily looking at all the possible opportunities to partner where they could make that go faster.
Oh, fascinating. Fascinating. So your distinction between creativity and innovation is so important. I also think the other distinction that gets missed sometimes is the difference between technology and innovation. And I wonder how many folks, as they're responding to that survey, when they think of innovation and when they're talking about what took more than 2 years and what took those different periods of time, I wonder how much of that is technology driven and how much of it is insight driven innovation. Because what I've seen is those time horizons are very different. And the ones that, to your point, people that say, oh, I want to do it in-house, it's because I want to own the patent.
Right.
I want the technology to be in-house. And so we can partner to do this different marketing thing or this unique, different go-to-market thing or whatever. But we're going to put a different engine in this Ford. It's going to come from Ford patents and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Do you think that plays a role?
Absolutely. We've got 2 questions on the table.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No, that's good. Yes, that plays a role. And I think innovation for innovation's sake versus innovation to beat our competitors versus innovation to reduce our costs. The impetus for innovation can be a lot of different things, right? But still, even when people are really clear, I think one of the things that I love doing with executives is just pushing them a little bit to look at all the different opportunities that are worth investigating.
Yes.
Pick it up and kick the tires and then decide if you want to do something with that. Because oftentimes they've kind of just grown up in their own career where what they were exposed to was certain paths of innovation and they've just never played in the other places. So part of it's exposure and just making them aware of what's out there on the menu, whether they do that or not.
Right, right. So maybe a CMO that grew up through the marketing ranks and became CEO has a different definition of innovation and what it actually looks like than a CFO or chief innovation officer or something that is then elevated to the CEO post.
Absolutely. And then the orgs where they were senior director, VP, whatever, they were also within the definitions of their CEO's framework for innovation, right?
So
they've already cultivated a certain lens to it and may not realize that they've got blinders in addition to that lens.
Oh, that's fascinating. You have a cool job.
I do have a cool job. I really love what I do. To your second point about technology, yes, I think because technology drives so much of our lives personally and professionally, and the pace of innovation in technology forces innovation in other parts of your business. It's really hard to separate technology and innovation. But innovation absolutely does not have to have a technological element to it. But innovations in technology end up pushing other forms of innovation or innovative thought.
Oh, that is a helpful distinction because it's still innovation. It's almost like not an unintended consequence, but the innovation in technology impacts innovation in other spaces. So it's almost like a second order benefit.
Absolutely. It's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. One other word that really jumped out at me in your opening statement was viable.
Yeah.
I'd love to unpack that with you. What does something viable mean to you?
Well, I think it's more about when we're looking at innovation from this lens of it's about getting an idea to market. How do you capitalize an idea? Creativity is going to generate 20 possibilities, right? More, less. But when you're thinking about capitalizing on an idea and turning that idea into an investment that pays for itself, right? That ROI, that return on investment, then there's some element of looking at viability, right?
Okay.
Is this viable from a cost perspective, from an impact on environment perspective, from a societal perspective? Viable. It's a filter that ideas get put through.
Right, right. And I can imagine that viability in 2016 is different than viability in 2023, just in terms of where we are as a corporate culture, where we are as a species, and what we've been through in the last few years and what we now know about risk. The way we look at risk and the way we're organized to do things has changed so dramatically in the last few years that I can imagine something that was viable in your pipeline 5 years ago might not meet that same threshold today.
Yeah. And even just a recent example, the vaccines for COVID, that mRNA technology has been around for a long time. And in fact, has the ability to cure AIDS. And yet it was not used back when the AIDS epidemic was raging through society and killing so many brilliant minds because it wasn't viable from a profit perspective. The population wasn't big enough and the benefit wasn't big enough, even though the technology was there for pharmaceutical companies to invest in it as a technology. But then when you have a global pandemic, now, we're going to bust out this technology. It was not a new technology that was just created in 2019. It has been there. And that's how we were able to pivot so quickly to create it. So viability has real world implications.
Oh my gosh.
On people, on communities, on the best and the worst of our society.
Wow. That is a very real and visceral example of why words matter and why definitions and context matter, especially in the space of innovation and in the space of health-related issues. These innovation conversations are more or less academic when you're talking about iPhones and cars and trucks.
Right.
But some aspects of it have real consequences.
Yeah. I mean, we really do. Humans are amazing and we are innovative species. We always seek to grow and improve and learn and develop. And so if you really dig into what is possible, we absolutely already have the knowledge to solve many of the world's biggest diseases. We have the tools to solve poverty. We have the tools to solve so many issues, but whether they get funded or whether they get supported is a whole nother process. And so from a corporate perspective, viability means a lot of things. Do we have the staffing? Is the customer market there? Do we have the energy. Right now, burnout is real. A lot of great ideas are kind of being held right now because people just don't have the energy to lean into them. So Viable can cover a lot of things, but make no mistake, somebody is deciding what viable means.
That's exactly what I was thinking as you were saying that, because it goes to power,
Absolutely.
right? It's the power that decides viability.
Absolutely. And so I can't even imagine how frustrating it is if you're some entrepreneur who has discovered the cure for something, the solution for something, and you can't get it funded, you can't get it going, even though it's there.
Yeah.
That I can't even imagine what that feels like. It would be so devastating.
Oh, I can only imagine. And probably not a fictional example, or it's not a hypothesis. There's somebody somewhere with a solution to something that just doesn't meet the threshold for quote unquote viability for the people that could actually make it happen.
Yeah.
So that was a very helpful conversation around what innovation is. I want to shift gears and talk a bit about what innovation isn't. What isn't innovation?
Well, I would say I'd go back to, again, I like to juxtapose creativity to innovations.
Sure.
So creativity is not innovation. It's a different thing.
Mm.
It's that way in which we take something that doesn't exist and it becomes something we can see, hear, smell, touch, or taste, right? They move from being something in our brain to something in the world.
Mm.
So that process of creativity is really interesting. And one of my backgrounds is I really love studying the neuroscience of things. I like to bring kind of a brain science lens.
Yeah.
And so it was really fun for me when I was doing this research, discovering some of the research that's been done on creativity and the fact that whenever we have that aha moment, that flash of insight, it actually can be measured in the brain. And there's stuff that's happening in the brain before you have the recognition that you're having an aha moment. So for example, researchers have found that a third of a second before we have that moment of aha, there's a burst of gamma waves above our right ear. And it's a certain brain structure where there's a rush of blood to that part of the brain. And then in addition to that, we have the experience of our occipital, that's our vision, can kind of go dim for a millisecond. And so this has been proven on MRI machines and all kinds of things. But we tend to have this little moment before we go, oh, I have my moment of insight. But what's interesting is scientists have figured out how we can set ourselves up to have aha moments. And you can actually do this with the team. There's all kinds of ways you can set up a team to have flashes of insight. So my three favorites are, first of all, so any of you can do this. If you're trying to come up with a good idea, here's some ways to do it. First is fill your library, your brain library, with lots of different data. So read a lot of stuff, take a lot of stuff in. And what's really important is to go out of your comfort zone and look at sources you wouldn't normally go to. So you're trying to just put a lot of stuff in there. And then the second step is take a break. You have to take a break. People do not have insight while thinking about it. They have insight when they step away from it because our brain then has time for those neurons to fire and make connections. And a little side topic, companies in Silicon Valley have used mushrooms and microdosing of psilocybin. Like they do that with their engineers. And Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs wrote about it, was this whole thing that was done that created microchips. Microchips, the idea of a microchip and how it would work came out of these microdosing sessions in Silicon Valley. So you can, if you really want to have fun with it, you can microdose to support your brain and having these moments.
Nice.
But if you just take a break and give your brain a chance to make connections, it can support. And then there's the third thing you can do, which is sensory gating, which is you're kind of replicating that vision going offline for a second. You put yourself in calming or non-overstimulating environments. Water is particularly helpful. This is why people have so many good ideas in the shower, is that it kind of replicates that sensory thing going offline and it helps generate more ideas. So you can actually set yourself up to have an aha moment if you want to.
Wow. Exposing yourself to lots of different data, taking a break, and sensory gating.
Yeah, those are the three kind of ways to generate flashes of insight.
Oh, that's fantastic. The thing I love about that whole set of insights you shared is it gives you an alternative to working more.
Yes.
Nothing on that list says you need to try harder or be better. You don't have to be more skillful. You don't have to work an extra 20 hours to be innovative, to be creative, any of those things. These are things you can do in the time you spend working now.
Yeah. And in fact, working harder and thinking more just delays the aha moment. Like we can get in the way of what our brain is built to do. Our brain is a continually learning machine, and it is designed to make connections. So we kind of just have to get out of our own way.
Mm.
And yet when you think about a lot of work cultures, that is not the work culture. We now live in hustle culture where you do more all the time and we're burning ourselves out. We got to allow the body to do what it was built to do.
It takes me back to your earlier comment around innovation in technology and that acceleration driving innovation in other spaces. It almost feels like the defining of this productivity culture and the innovation that has pumped into that in terms of here's how to get more productive, here's how to be able to do more stuff in less time. The acceleration of that from a value standpoint and from an innovation standpoint almost sounds like it runs completely counter to what's necessary and what's beneficial for these moments of insight.
Absolutely. And I would say the other critical element is this is Amy Edmondson's research from Harvard, but psychological safety. For organizations to really thrive and grow and for teams to perform their best, they need psychological safety. And she defines that as confidence that the team will not reject, embarrass, or punish you. Can we just talk about what a low bar that is? Like basically you could say, hey, I've got an idea, or have we thought about, and you're confident that you won't be treated like crap. It's a low bar, but yet a lot of people don't feel like they have that at work. That if you come up with an idea, if you question a leader, if you point out a mistake, you're going to be sidelined or there'll be some kind of consequence for you. But what she found was when workers have psychological safety, innovation goes way up. People are more engaged. They feel like they can bring their real selves to work. And so I've gone into organizations where they claim to have a commitment to creativity and innovation. Yet how people are treated is just shutting it down all day, every day.
Wow. That definition is fantastic, by the way, the reject, embarrass, punish, and the absence of that being a psychologically safe environment. You're right. That is a very low bar and still not achieved by some cultures and environments.
Yeah.
What it makes me think of is how you invest in innovation. What does it mean to invest in innovation? And that is something we talk about with our clients because we take a coaching lens to how you drive innovation, and starting with building capabilities and making sure everyone's on the same page and all those other things. But usually when you talk about investing in innovation, what you read as a headline is someone bought an innovation center, someone purchased a startup or whatever, or a new technology from someone else. I wonder if you have any thoughts about what it means to invest in innovation.
That's a great question. When I work with organizations, it's really about thinking through how are they supporting both creativity. Do you have teams who have the time and the space and the resources to break some glass, to engage in the breakthrough stuff? Are you supporting people in taking risks, making mistakes, just playing in that space?
Right.
And then the second part of it is once there's some good ideas there, then are you investing in that process, right? That process by which you take that idea and start to turn it into something that's viable. That's staffing, that's financial resources. Do they have the technology? Do they have a good manager who's been trained in how to cultivate that kind of environment?
Yes.
What blows my mind is how many organizations spend so much money, but won't invest in manager training. And yet managers are the people who all day, every day, shape every employee's experience. The data is super clear. People leave a boss, not a company.
Right.
And people try to influence the experience they're having. And there's a lot of toxic bosses out there. And then there's just a lot of clueless bosses out there. And so investing in leadership training, investing in your people so that they have the skill set to create the environment for innovation, that they can be encouraging, that they can be supportive, that they can challenge in the right ways, that they can wave a flag up the organization saying, hey, you guys say we're prioritizing this, but you've underfunded us. What do you want to do about that? All of those are skill sets and things that can happen every day that can get in the way of innovation really being successful.
That's so well said. And just flashing back over my career on different examples of what you're describing. And it's really just validating for a person with your background and expertise to look at the day-to-day lived experience of people in those environments and say, this is not setting people up for success in this environment. It's very easy to buy a building.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy to purchase a patent or buy a company. It may be expensive.
Right.
But it's not hard.
Yeah.
It's not that expensive to train managers.
No, not in the long run, not at all.
Right. But it is hard. It is hard. It's hard work.
Yeah.
And so I feel like sometimes we substitute the expensive, easy thing for the cheap, hard thing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always pay off for us in the long run from a culture of innovation standpoint.
No, it's true. And one other thing that I like to talk about with innovation that can get in the way is, so you had an innovation process, you have an idea that's viable. And then the other major system that can break down is the ability to execute on it.
Mm.
And I always like to talk about these 3 examples of failed execution, right? Like Xerox, did they stumble because no one noticed that Canon had introduced personal copiers? No, they knew it. They had ideas within their organization and they just couldn't execute. Same with Kodak, right?
Mm.
They were not blind to the rise of digital photography and they had plans to pivot. They just didn't execute fast enough. Same with Sears. Did they have no perception of what Walmart was doing and creating that everyday low price discount retail format? No, they had plans to do it. And so a lot of organizations that fail because not a lack of innovation, but because they couldn't execute on those ideas.
Mm.
And so you also have to look at what's happening in the day-to-day ability to get stuff done and the accountability for that. That can be a big place of improvement in a lot of organizations.
Oh, that's such a great call out. And I wonder if it's even seen as part of the innovation process in every company.
No, it's often not. It's like, oh, we came up with a great idea. It's just going to get done. And yet a lot of organizations really have gaps in their execution process. And, looking at a lot of organizations, I think the biggest danger to organizations is if they are profitable enough, they then don't spend the time looking at how they could be better.
Right.
Again, I've worked with organizations where they're making a lot of money and it's a fraction of what they could be making.
Right.
But it's enough for them to say, hey, we're doing great. And we're not going to look at how we could be better. Or they start to have a lot of turnover and they don't look at what's driving that.
Mm.
And you get new excited employees who 3 years from now will be bitter and frustrated, but right now they're happy. But they never look at, what are our people trying to tell us?
Mm-hmm.
They're giving us information before they leave. People can be really blind to that. And yet there's really rich data there about what's in the way of innovation and execution.
Such a great call out. And there are functions and data sets that are rarely put in the same place. Human resources, recruiting, learning and development, talent development, whatever, and the innovation team or the department that's in charge of innovation, and having a conversation about, okay, what we're seeing here tell us about what we're seeing here?
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, that's the cost of conference room, a couple of pizzas to actually start to unpack that.
Right.
And it just doesn't happen. We talked a lot about innovation, what it is, what it isn't. We talked about your background and the cool job you have. What do you do when you're not doing these cool things? What kind of hobbies do you have?
Oh, great question. Well, I am a recent convertee to the pickleball experience.
Oh, right, yes.
I'm knee deep in that. I started that this year. Recently discovered mountain biking. I grew up skiing. I was a skier I grew up on Vail Mountain. I skied at the age of 2.
Wow.
So I've been a skier my whole life. And now I live in California, so I don't do that much anymore. But mountain biking, man, when I'm going down a trail, it feels like skiing. And it has that same feeling.
Really?
It's really fun. And I love it. The invention of e-bikes has made mountain biking really accessible to me now.
Yeah.
And I love it. That's fun. I'm a big reader. I love to read. I love hanging out with friends. And I really enjoy fabric arts. I make a lot of stuff with fabric.
Yeah.
Whether it's quilting or I make these really cool collages where you build the image out of different pieces of fabric and use fabric like paint.
Yeah.
So those are all the kind of my fun hobby things that I do on the side.
Oh, that's very cool. I have never heard someone, this is definitely a first in my memory. I've never heard someone compare skiing and mountain biking.
Yeah, I love it. It's
That
so
is
fun.
fascinating. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just when you're going down that trail and swooping left and right and feeling the gravity and all of it's really fun. And what's cool is a lot of great mountain biking trails are actually summer sills.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm a small town kid from Southeast Alabama, so neither of those things are, we had no mountains and no snow.
Yeah.
So it's always fascinating to hear about those things. Thanks for sharing that. The fabric piece makes me think of my great grandmother's quilting hobby and what she did with those things. But it's always fascinating to me to hear about hobbies because innovators always have these interesting side hobbies because I feel like there's always an element of how you innovate. You're stitching things together, you're building images out of smaller pieces, the visceral experience of going down the hill and all those things and the way you talk about that. I don't think we think differently in different environments. I think we carry it with us in different places.
I now trust the process of my own brain. Before I used to be the kind of person who's like, I'm just going to think harder, make this happen. I'm a person who is a force of nature. I do make stuff happen.
I believe that. Yes.
I have had to learn how to, like right now I'm writing my next book and I have to trust the process. So I'll read a ton of stuff. And at first I'm not seeing the themes yet. It's not coming together. And then all of a sudden things start popping. And before that used to distress me. I used to be like, oh no, it's not happening. But I think we do get wisdom with life in the sense that we start to just trust the process a little bit more. We realize it will be successful. So my weekends, I really try to go play because I know that that's actually going to facilitate what I'm trying to build anyway. So it's the yin and yang of each other. You need them both.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Any advice for innovators?
Well, I would say trust your own process, like find out what works for you and create the environment that supports your own creative thinking and your process of innovation. And that includes challenge yourself to see what you can't see, whether that's intentionally putting yourself in some uncomfortable places or hiring someone to come in and help you see it a new way. I think those are important things. And then the third thing I would say is it's only as good as your culture. So you really have to pay attention to those places. If you do nothing else, lean into psychological safety. It will pay off 1,000-fold. But if you're not building an environment where people feel safe and supported, all the great ideas in the world aren't going to get where they need to go. So you have to do all of those things together. But then magic happens when you do all of them together.
Magic happens. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today and the conversation. The time flew by. I really appreciate you spending time with us today. Dr. Britt Andreatta, innovation is the work that's required to make something viable.
Thank you so much. I loved this conversation and I hope your listeners had a good time too.
I'm sure they did. Take care. We'd love to hear your thoughts about this week's show. You can drop us a line on Twitter at Outlast LLC, OUTLAST LLC, or follow us on LinkedIn where we're Outlast Consulting. Until next time, keep innovating, whatever that means.